All right, so just quickly before we get started with today's discussion, right? The assignment for next time. So, working on the Aristotle essay, be Brian and Caressa. Caressa does not appear to be here, great. Working on the David Hume essay will be Mackenzie, Canby, and, well, Lily will be writing on it, but she's not going to be here. She's got the theater thing this week. Working on John Stuart Mill will be Xavier and Cindy, and working on Nietzsche will be Chase and Alan, who's also not here. Okay, so yes?
Is Alan
No. He's the guy who usually sits there.
new?
Yeah. Okay, so. Right. What were we doing? Right, okay, so questions. So what you're going to be looking at for next time, right, are questions of morality, right and wrong, and what it means to live a good life, right? What it means to be a moral person. So the earliest of the writers is Aristotle, and so what you're going to be looking at if you're working on Aristotle are the following, right? What does Aristotle regard as the function of human life? How does he define what is good for human beings? Secondly, what does Aristotle mean by virtue, and how does he think one acquires it? Third, what are feelings, capacities, and dispositions? How do they relate to virtue? And finally, what is the mean, and how does reaching for it help us to achieve virtue? All right. Everybody who needs this got it? Okay. Moving right along to Nietzsche, who's actually sort of at the end here. So, does Nietzsche define morality the same way Aristotle or any other more traditional thinker would? What's the major difference in Nietzsche's concept of morality or moralities, right? Does he believe that morality is a single thing? Second, which does Nietzsche consider more genuinely moral? Maintaining one's individual integrity or engaging in pro-social behavior with others, and why? Third, what is Nietzsche's complaint about the way thinkers usually approach the problem of morality? Right. Essentially, what does he think is wrong with the way other people talk about morality? And fourth, does Nietzsche think that moral virtue is in any way related to happiness? And so what? All right, David Hume. So those who are working on Hume. First, where does Hume believe moral distinctions originate? How does this go against what he claims is conventional wisdom, right? You'll find this probably in the first paragraph of his essay. Second, what does Hume mean when he talks about social virtues? So what that he regards virtue as a social quality? And third, how does Hume balance our self-interest against our feelings for others? And what does this have to do with the way he classifies different virtues? And finally, John Stuart Mill. Oh, were you writing that down? I'm sorry.
I was writing a point. I was writing a question. I got it.
Oh, okay. All right, so for Mill, right? On what basis does Mill decide whether an action is right or wrong? What does Mill think makes an action right, and so what? Secondly, how does Mill define happiness? What does he mean when he talks about the greatest happiness principle? And finally, does Mill regard all forms of pleasure or happiness as equally moral? Why or why not? Okay, so for today, and like I said, I realized that I thought that this stuff had posted and it didn't, so I apologize for it getting up late. Like you will, you'll have time in class to work through it. But the big issues that you want to try to deal with today, right? Essentially, what all of these guys are talking about is the tension between free will and determinism, right? The basic question that they're asking is, to what extent are we free to make our own choices, right? To what extent are we free to act in the world without constraints? So, free will seems more or less self-explanatory, right? What does free will mean?
Freedom to make choices.
Yeah, freedom to make choices, right? Freedom to make your own choices. So what does determinism then mean? If determinism is the opposite of free will.
Everything is already like planned out for you.
Exactly, yeah. Someone or something else is guiding those choices, right? So what you're going to want to do with your particular thinker is figure out where he falls on this continuum, right? Is he falling closer towards the free will side of it? Is he falling closer towards the determinism side of it, right? Is he doing something else? Right, so consider, right, to what extent human beings have freedom to choose for themselves, and what constraints are placed upon that freedom. Okay, so who's supposed to be working on Augustine? Okay, the two of you. All right, so if you could go over to him. Who's supposed to be working on Jean-Paul Sartre? Just you. Okay. Who's supposed to be working on Harry G. Frankfurt? You two. Okay, so yeah, if you come to her. And so that leaves, who's Thomas Hobbes, right? Okay, so I'm guessing that you probably didn't, and you know, it's okay if you didn't, I'm guessing you probably didn't have time to read the Hobbes article, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you, instead of working on Hobbes, who's probably the hardest, why don't you sit and work with Mackenzie, and you guys work through Sartre together? That way nobody's working by themselves, right? Part of the idea here is for you guys to explain these things to each other. All right, so you got 20 minutes.